The true story of World War II's greatest escape began here, 50 years ago, in a desolate forest near what is now Zagan, Poland, about 90 miles southeast of Berlin. It was here that the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, built the prisoner of war camp known as Stalag Luft III. There isn't much left of the camp today, but during the war it housed more than 10,000 POWs, one of whom was Paul Brickhill. While he never escaped, he did survive to tell the true story of those who did.
There will be no escapes from this camp.
Colonel von Luger, it is the sworn duty of all officers to try to escape. If they can't, it is their sworn duty to cause the enemy to use an inordinate number of troops to guard them, and their sworn duty to harass the enemy to the best of their ability.
Paul Brickhill's tale of these remarkable men and their indomitable spirit was published as The Great Escape in 1950. 13 years later, it was brought to the screen and became the blockbuster hit of that summer. Now, 30 years after it premiered, The Great Escape is still one of the most popular films of all time.
Gentlemen, no doubt you've heard the immortal words of our new commandant. Devote your energies to things other than escape and sit out the war as comfortably as possible. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
It was the filmmaker's intent to remain true to the original book, yet create characters that were composites of the real American and British prisoners. The organizer of the escape, Big X, was patterned after Roger Bushell. Danny the Tunnel King was really Wally Floody. Blythe the Forger was Tim Whalen, and Eric Ashley Pitt was Royal Navy Flying Officer Peter Fanshawe.
I remember feeling it was a great responsibility to play a man who existed, who really, you know, you fictionalize someone's real life, you have a very definite responsibility. But the part, I was assured, was absolutely true to what Ashley Pitt was like and what he did.
Tally-ho.
Creating characters that were true to history was one thing, but how could such an unbelievable caper be filmed in a believable manner? That was the challenge that faced director John Sturges when he tackled The Great Escape.
How many are you taking out?
250.
250? Yeah. You're crazy. You ought to be locked up. You too. 250 guys just walking down the road, just like that.
Sturges died in 1992, but his passion to make this epic war drama lives on as one of the great stories of film history. Even though Sturges had become a successful director with such films as Bad Day at Black Rock and Gunfight at the OK Corral, he could not convince Hollywood to make The Great Escape.
I tried to do this for about 8 years before I became an independent, and everybody just smiled and changed the subject. With the Mirisch brothers and with United Artists, I'd just come off a successful picture, The Magnificent Seven, and I think if I wanted to direct the telephone book, they'd have probably at least given me a hearing.
And it was United Artists and the Mirisch brothers that gave him the go-ahead and $4 million to make his picture. In much the same way that he did with The Magnificent Seven, Sturges cast another memorable ensemble.
He had great faith in the actor, and he would storyboard everything. He never talked to me about character, didn't talk to him about anything. What was on the script was what you shot. What was on the storyboard was the way it was shot. And that was it.
Another actor from The Magnificent Seven who made an impression on Sturges was Charles Bronson. He joined The Great Escape as Danny the Tunnel King. Donald Pleasance, who played the mild-mannered forger, was particularly qualified for his role.
Well, I was flying in Lancaster bombers, and I was shot down on a daylight raid over France. And eventually I was marched up to Germany with the retreating German army and ended up in a camp called Stalag Luft I. To begin with, I used to make suggestions. But they didn't go down very well with John Sturgis and the American crew, who believed that all people in a prison camp, especially if they were Americans, were enormously brave and would never say rude things to a German who was armed to the teeth. But so I made a few remarks and then I shut up.
James Garner also used his own war experience to develop his character.
I was a scrounger for a whole company in Yeongdong-po, Korea. And so I knew a little bit about the hustle and whatever that went on. So I knew basically what I thought Henley would be like, and of course I did that.
What's holding us up now is the new form of this travel permit. We've no idea what they look like.
Here's one. And a military identity card.
You get 10 out of 10 for this, old boy.
Thank you, sir. Take good care of that.
Where did you get this?
It's on loan.
If I remember correctly, the first scene we did was the one where James Garner, Steve McQueen, and I have made this booze and are drinking. And that was a difficult scene. It doesn't seem so in the movie, but it was difficult because we each tried to find a different reaction to this raw alcohol that we drank. It was a matter of kind of experimentation and doing it over and over again until John was satisfied.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
John gave you a great deal of freedom to try things. And then but he had a very clear sense of when he liked something.
I was a British actor, born in Scotland, very green in many ways, not much traveled. And here I am dumped into a huge American production, building the entire set at Geiselgasteig and down in Germany, and working with people like Steve McQueen and James Garner. I mean, it was a sort of dream come true.
Steve was perfect. Steve was the fellow that represented everything about the indomitable spirit that these fellows had. They were cocky. They were actually afraid. They were actually brought down physically and mentally by the whole thing. They never showed it.
Are all American officers so ill-mannered?
About 99%.
In order to be as authentic as possible, Sturgis and his assistant, Robert Raelier, tried to visit the original camp in Zagan, Poland. But in 1962, it was behind the Iron Curtain. They actually considered making the film in the mountains above Los Angeles.
We both wanted to make the picture here, so we said, okay, we can make the picture here. What we'll do is, we'll find a place with some pine trees, and we'll just make the whole thing here. So I went up between Idlewild and Palm Springs, and I found 6 pine trees. They weren't too full, but, you know, there were 6 of them. I said, it looks like the Black Forest to me. I went to Germany, touring around, and then I had to call John and say, you know, this is going to be a big surprise to you, but unfortunately, you know what Germany looks like? It looks like Germany. It would really work here.
This eventually became the home of The Great Escape, Munich's Bavaria Studios, in the suburb of Geiselgasteig.
Once we decided to build a camp in the studio, we had to prepare the grounds. They had a wonderful spot, a forest behind the studio, which they cleared out. And as you will see in the drawing, we decided to build a camp there.
Using historical photographs of the real camp, Carrère created detailed sketches, blueprints, and models that helped him engineer the legendary Stalag Luft III on the back lot of the studio.
We brought the Minister of the Interior out, very elderly gentleman. We put him on the Chapman crane. We brought him up in the air. We let him look down and said, you know, Mr. Minister, what we'd like to do is tear out 400 trees. Now, explaining our reason, we'll now tell you what we would do in return. We'll plant 2 for 1. We want the prison camp to look like it's enclosed by another prison, the trees. And he sat on the Chapman crane, and he looked through the lens, and he said, I understand. And we started bulldozing trees.
We were very careful to be authentic about everything in the picture. The uniforms are all the way they were. The camp is the way it was. The wires the way it was. The strip of death. And inside all that were the various huts the men lived in, and of course the goon towers where they watched every move people made. This is almost a dead ringer for the real camp at Saigon.
I was amazed. I thought it was an amazing set. It was an exact replica of the camp I was in, just about. I mean, except where it was needed to be different for cinematic reasons. It was an exact reproduction of a prisoner of war camp, and just as frightening.